Welcome to an audiobook entitled Parish Management and Operations, The Buck Stops Here, narrated by Catholic author Michael Brinda. We hope you enjoy the segment and find it useful in your ministerial work.
Chapter 28, The PMO Organizational Chart in Relation to Culture. We begin with a quote from Russell Ackoff. Man cannot conceive of an organization that some are not capable of subverting. End quote. If you are not managing those who report to you while concurrently operating under the correct culture as your invisible but no less present assistant, your staff is mismanaging you. Not you personally, but you as in the destiny of your parish as a provider of superior PMO service. The reality is that your PMO organizational chart pyramid is actually inverted. There's only the mere paper illusion you are the boss. The actual bosses are the names written in all the other organizational chart boxes. The proverbial tail is wagging the dog. No administrator should ever confuse employee or volunteer lip service given to following their instructions with personnel actually following their instructions. Accepting lip service is the same as sailing in a fog. In a fog, you can convince yourself you are anywhere from Disneyland to Paducah, but that does not mean you are where you should be. Can you detect the difference between employee lip service and employees actually following your instructions and delivering superior PMO services? Will you do this? If your observed PMO services are not superior in every dimension, you will never be a superior service provider. And if you are not providing superior PMO service in every dimension to your parishioners, how do you look in the mirror? Isn't that your job as a PMO administrator? To ensure superior services across the board are provided at every point of contact between PMO and the parishioner? Indeed, what is the point of even having a PMO administrator on the org chart if they are not going to proactively ensure superior service is provided to the parishioners? However, please consider this. Where else can a parishioner go for PMO services but the parish near them? Oh, wait. They do have other options. If so inclined, they can choose to go to another church denomination or quit on their faith altogether, and many people do. Of course, on paper, any number and quality of PMO services above 0 is greater than no services at all. But the PMO administrator either exists on the parish org chart to provide parishioners with the highest possible depth, breadth, and quality of services, or the PMO administrator position doesn't need to exist at all. Just eliminate it altogether. One must make up his or her mind to provide superior service and also provide all the services that should exist commensurate with your geographic area, not only as expressed in words through the parish mission statement, but also in concrete written employee policies on job performance shaped by the correct culture that allows for management to manage employees and volunteers to that clear and written standard. If you are gradually building the impression that part of being a PMO administrator, while most likely inheriting a broken culture, is an intense, high-energy, servant-oriented turnaround job, you would be correct. But happily note the job is not necessarily time-intensive. The job is knowledge-intensive and perseverance-driven, but not necessarily time-intensive. PMO administration only becomes time-intensive for those who do not know what they are doing or refuse to engage in doing what they should. If you don't like the PMO outcomes you are generating, which is to most accurately say the operation you are inheriting wherever you are assigned is underperforming. If you do not like the work product output in accuracy, quality, scope, speed, results, etc. of the personnel who report to you, does that mean you should change the culture? No. To repeat, you do not change the culture. You kill the existing culture and install a new one. Technically speaking, of course we can literally only do one thing at a time, but conceptually, take the view that killing and replacing the culture is a holistic PMO exercise. There is no pathway to greatness for any organization without installing a new, enterprise-wide culture that animates superior performance in everyone and in everything they do. If a venture does not strive to greatness, an attitude reflected in and by its operating culture, not just in mere words but also in daily action, you have a broken culture and you are wasting your time until you recognize this truth. No PMO org chart tinkering will make a significant difference. To take no further action is to institutionalize mediocrity, and to be honest, there is no need for an administrator to oversee mediocrity if mediocrity has been enshrined by the culture as an accepted, expected, and sufficient PMO outcome. Just remove the administrator position from the parish org chart, save the payroll expense, and leave the position empty until someone is ready to do the job properly. Why? Because the worst thing you can do is occupy a box on the org chart, giving everyone the false impression a particular job is being filled, when in fact the job is not actually being done right, only babysat by its current occupant. The only reason the administrator level of manage should exist on the parish org chart is to, Shazam, proactively administrate. You defile the org chart and delude everyone, including yourself, by including an org chart box that designates an active PMO administrator position, when in fact there is no such position except for it existing as a box on paper. That's called a fraud, a sham in the secular world, and a sin in our world. It is nothing more than revealing the existence of a spiritual, future-robbing Ponzi scheme, whereby the growth of the church in the post-World War II area continued in spite of poor PMO, not because of it. But when the music stopped, which is to say the post-war attendance growth stopped, the parishioner attrition epidemic began. One reason why? Dysfunctional PMO. We simply took for granted the enemy was sleeping and the mass attendance and vocation numbers would continue. But our enemy never sleeps. The org chart must reflect the way things actually are in PMO, not phantom reality or the way you wish for things to be in the future. Furthermore, do not accept the administrator role. Do not place your name inside the PMO administrator box on the PMO org chart, unless and until all those you report to understand that if your name is in that box on the org chart, you intend to vigorously do your job, and a huge part of your job is to replace, not fix, but replace, a broken culture should one exist. And believe me, a broken culture will exist. Chapter 29. Providing full disclosure and advance warning. A quote by Seneca and the same quote in English by Benjamin Franklin. If you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. The dog we lie with in our current context, a broken culture. The fleas we get up with, mediocre performance, or worse. The contextual message here, if you operate within a broken culture, It cannot be a surprise to anyone that your results will suffer, and everyone above you in management on the org chart knows this, or at least they should. But what does those you report to may not know is, what happens if and when you ever decide you are tired of fleas? Before you take any action, your advance input and notification is required to be given to those you report to. Specifically, as the PMO administrator, you must in advance make the above points crystal clear to whoever you report to, such that they are not only clear about the details, the who, what, where, when, why, and how of your PMO culture killing and replacement efforts, but you also fully read them into what was explained above regarding the projected PMO bumpy ride to hurricane-level turmoil, which, like white on rice, inevitably travels with killing the old culture and installing a new culture. In other words, expect employee or volunteer turnover, perhaps wrongful termination litigation, and so state to whoever should know these are responsibilities and possibilities in advance. And let's not forget, you can't stop the gossip train. So be forewarned once you begin the process of killing the old culture and creating the new culture. The parish gossip train is likely to leave the station in a hurry. Your boss will hopefully accept your forecasted organizational turmoil as something that goes part and parcel with long overdue changes and improvements, so long as they are not surprised and they understand the reasoning and objectives behind your plans. Bosses do not like surprises. Bosses do not like fielding phone calls or reading emails or letters from angry, long-time parishioners, PMO employees, and volunteers. Bosses do not like negative publicity in the media, and bosses especially do not enjoy receiving phone calls from the bosses above them. Make sure your bosses, and perhaps others, are made fully aware of the road you intend to travel before initially taking any action on culture. Why? A realignment of PMO in one parish is one thing, but the impact that such changes may have on the larger system of which you are a part is another valid consideration. Maybe not for you, but at least for somebody. The PMO administrator is really informing the pastor, unless they are the pastor, and the bishop that some complaints may be received as you settle into the work and the work that the bishop is sending you to do. The PMO administrator might also do well to inform the other pastors within their deanery that they might hear some feedback and they better be in for some ripple concerns from their PMO employees and volunteers. However, if your boss ties your hands, if your boss explicitly limits or forbids your ability to replace the existing broken culture and install a new culture, at that point, as the saying goes, it is what it is. You must act in obedience to valid authority. But if you are able to articulate what has been presented here on the impact of a broken culture on PMO, perhaps even hand them this book or ask them to listen to this audio book and identify certain chapters for them to read or listen to. With prayer, we would hope you would be given the authority to do your job correctly and fully. Why? Your boss should know, and you must certainly know by this point, that if you do not address a broken culture, superior delivery of PMO services to parishioners will never be achieved when it could and should be achieved, and absolutely not for some ego-driven reasons whatsoever, but for the sole reason that those God has sent us to serve deserve to be served in a superior manner. Since when do we enshrine mediocrity and mislabel it as superior service? Any service less than superior must be viewed by any administration at any level as an opportunity to improve what it does, not for its own sake, but according to Scripture, for the sake of those we are called to serve and for the glory of His kingdom. You must be able to clearly articulate this point so no one incorrectly concludes you are self-centered. You are solely parishioner-centered, and everyone must note this distinction. How? By noting that above and beyond average performance is not really above and beyond anything whatsoever. Above and beyond average is actually the minimally tolerable baseline for PMO performance and to remain employed. And should anyone think you are animated toward superior PMO for some self-serving, selfish, ego-aggrandizing reasons, just carry on and go about your work. Kill the old culture, install the new culture, and gently but firmly educate such folks about the scriptural-based commitment to serving those who need us in the most superior way possible, and that anything less than superior is simply an opportunity for us to show further improvement. Simple, straightforward. However, what if your superior, having received the inevitable complaints about you, becomes anxious, worried, and asks you for an explanation of your actions as the PMO administrator? Things are getting rough. Complaints are being voiced. Because you discern this is a complicated matter to discuss, not to mention what you are attempting to do and the manner in which you are attempting to do it is a completely foreign process to your boss and was a bit of a reach for him to approve in the first place, you choose to ask if you can have a few days to compose a written answer to his concerns about the feedback he is receiving, which is actually happening in the office, why it is happening, what is true, what is false, and when things will get back to what he terms normal around here. You discern it would be wiser to write your response rather than spontaneously shoot from the hip and give partial answers to his many concerns, perhaps all valid from his perspective, because there is a good chance you would forget some critical component to a reasoned, cogent, comprehensive, informative, and well-crafted response. You realize that some of his concerns, if not all of his concerns, are animated solely by a lack of prior experience and detailed understanding of not only what you are doing, but why you are doing things in the manner that you are. Seeing things from the pastor's perspective for a moment and walking in his shoes, he must be thinking, were things really that bad around here? Here is a sample response to address his concerns. Dear Father Smith, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with me last week to share with me the concerns of the parish community as we transition into a better and more functional parish administration. At least we can affirm from our conversation that the community responded in the way I anticipated to you during my hiring interview, namely that a superior PMO administrator of the kind you have hired would necessarily need to address the brokenness that is bound to exist in any organization that has not had a strong PMO administrator. It is for that reason you hired me, of course, and it is also for that reason that these complaints have come about. As Dante demonstrates in his Purgatorio, after all growth in virtue comes with some growing pains. Specifically, though, you asked me to explain, number 1, what am I doing? Number 2, why am I doing it? And number 3, when the complaints will stop and we will start to move forward in a more routine way. The answer to your last question is much easier than the answer to the first two, so I will begin there. I expect that we will start to move forward in a more routine way by the end of the upcoming calendar year. The reason that it takes at least 1 year in the life of any organization to work through its normal cycles of operating and realign them so that they work in a superior manner is that if you consider the various cycles of parish life, ordinary time and the various seasons such as Lent, Easter, Advent, Christmas, and the various activities done over the course of those times, such as summer camps, budgeting and auditing and scheduling, you can see that remapping them onto a new strategic plan requires retooling, even replacing the persons responsible for ensuring they are performed in a superior manner. If you consider the strategic plan that you and I worked on together and agreed that it should be a practical rather than theoretical document, you will note that implementation of the plan requires some abilities that current staff do not presently have. Fine. For them, we provide new training opportunities to upgrade their skills where they have the capacity to be upgraded. If the persons responsible for implementation of the new plan, though, do not want to be retrained for whatever reason to do with whatever their new job descriptions are, then we need to either outsource the work to replace the person who would normally be doing it with someone who has the skill sets to do it. This, in a nutshell, is why we are experiencing frustration on the part of those who have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. When my own administrative assistant, for example, refuses to be taught how to perform various administrative tasks that are essential to the superior performance of my office, I need to address that fact directly. I need to do with her what you are doing with me, namely ask her for an accounting of herself that goes beyond, well, that's just the way we do it here, we've never done it that way before, or this is the way I've been doing it for 30 years. Don't get me wrong, I love Sister Philomena like my own aunt, but there is a superior way of doing things that integrates into the work that other staff members and volunteers are doing, and if that integration process does not work for all, then the entire accountability structure you and I put together in the new organizational chart will not work. In essence, I am wasting my time because it is inevitable I will ultimately fail. It so happens that all paid and volunteer staff are being realigned like Sister Philomena to perform according to a new organizational chart and new strategic plan. So it's absolutely natural for them to balk at new operational methods required to bring this about. But their greatest concerns are not really the teaching, guidance, and direction I have been providing, as much as it is what those things represent in their normal course of activities, namely change. They realize they are being asked to stop doing what is, quote, normal in their routine for them and start doing something for which they have not yet gotten into the groove. As to why they are complaining to you, I would say we both expect that if a person cannot receive satisfaction of a concern for him or her boss, then naturally that person will go up a level of administration and express those concerns to his or her boss's boss. That they're also expressing their concerns to the bishop himself is a sign of desperation and of a lack of faith in your own ability to resolve the issues satisfactorily for them, which is namely to restore the parish to the way things were rather than the way things need to be. They are seeking the pressure that can be applied to you from above to complement the pressure they are applying from below. No one works well in a pressure cooker, and their plan is to generate that kind of atmosphere and complaining to 2 levels of administration higher than mine. There is no real substance, of course, to these complaints, but what is concerning is that, as part of the aforementioned resistance to change, The persons making the complaints are doing so poorly with half-truths, out-of-context statements, and sometimes just plain false statements. For example, when the gardener complained to you that I was breaching subsidiarity by giving him direct instructions on how the front lawn of the parish should look, because he usually receives those instructions from Sister Philomena, he didn't tell you that Sister Philomena was present at the time I was giving him and her the larger plan for the picture day ceremony, and how the flowers, if kept only near the staircase in front of the chapel, would be blocked from view entirely during the photograph sessions of the parishioners who would be standing in front of them. In short, what I'm asking them to do in examples like this assist in driving the strategic plan that will result in more parishioners attending weekly Mass and greater efforts on their part for evangelizing those who do not attend Mass at all, both Catholics and future RCIA participants. You can see that the accomplishment of great plans requires implementation of small ones. So I am not being too demanding or unfair, but precisely what I need to be to ultimately create superior PMO. Aside from organizing everyone to do things right, which is its own kind of reward, I believe we can address PMO employee and volunteer morale by showing them the fruits of their labors, which they will start to see as early as this Sunday's festival celebration, which will be filled to capacity. At present, they only see their work in parts because that's the way they've been used to looking at it. But on Sunday, they'll see their work as a collective demonstration of what can be performed when working under a single organizational plan that brings all those parts together in a cohesive and superior manner. Concerning complaints by persons other than the paid staff and volunteers, the fact that the paid staff and volunteers can mobilize other parishioners to complain is evidence of their ability to organize at all if properly motivated. What you are receiving, though, is not an organized mobilization. Rather, it is several groups of persons coming to complain independently of one another on behalf of the concerns of one employee or another. It is evidence of the general mess that was in place when I arrived, rather than evidence of a new mess. Once that mess is cleaned up, after all, the complaints will turn to praises, not of me, but of you, and then you will have a different kind of problem to deal with, namely, that of living up to all the praise. One group's concerns, namely those of the parish council, need to be addressed in a particular way and by you. Councils are always advisory at this level. That is, their input is consultative, not deliberative. This particular council, though, has developed over time a sense of entitlement, expecting that its decisions be binding, not only on the life of the parish itself, but also interpreted as marching orders for the pastor. That is tail-wagging the dog kind of thinking, though, and it can be handled through a strategic reorganization of the parish council, so that those responsible for its work begin to channel their energy in proactively supporting the new strategic plan, which they themselves endorsed, but cannot, because of the complaints they are now receiving, bear to implement. Of course, any plan that cannot be implemented by those responsible for its implementation is no plan at all. In short, or at least a short end to a rather long letter for you on a Monday morning, I need you to both trust me and back me by referring all paid staff and volunteer concerns back to me. For my part, I will address them in a pastoral manner, and the most pastoral of manners, as you have often preached, involves telling people the truth they do not want to hear and moving them in the directions that they may, at first, like St. Peter, not want to go. Those who remain with us after this first year will be the kind of superior paid staff After all, we must also be wise stewards of parish money. And superior volunteer corps that we need to effectively fill our pews and events galleries for the purpose of realizing our mission to care for the spiritual and temporal needs of Christ's sheep in a superior manner. Yours in Christ, and then you insert your name here. Just going through the motions of serving others, why you are listening to this book, is not the message. Further note, you simply cannot kill the culture of any organization and install a new culture unless and until you practice all the tenets of that culture yourself in every form of communication or personal interaction with anyone on behalf of the parishioners where you are assigned. There is no hiding this, no dodging this, no denying this, and no deferring this fact to yourself even one more day.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.